today. Welcome to the continuation of our 8-part series, The Holocaust as an Interdisciplinary Tapestry, where we explore the multifaceted discipline of Holocaust studies through unique and previously unexplored lenses. As we convene today, it is with heavy hearts that we express our deepest concern for the ever-evolving dynamics in the war in Israel. Over the past few weeks, the region has witnessed a series of developments that have the potential to reshape the course of this long-standing and complex conflict. Today's event will feature Gendering the Holocaust with Professor Andrea Pető, a pre-recorded session as Professor Pető is receiving the Human Rights Award for the Babyn Yar Memorial in Ukraine as head of the advisory board. For those of you that may be new to our community, I'm Ellen Resnick, the Educational Programs and Outreach Manager at Classrooms Without Borders. Our mission transcends traditional boundaries of education, striving to combat anti-Semitism, genocide, and hate through the transformative power of learning, diversity, inclusion, and respect. We extend our sincere gratitude for your enduring support over the past 3 years, and we have conducted an impressive 468 virtual programs, engaging over 76,000 participants from nearly 60 countries, spanning 46 of the United States. As we gather here today to delve into the rich tapestry of Holocaust studies, we invite you to contribute to our mission by making a donation. A link will be provided in the chat for you in just a moment. Classrooms Without Borders, in coordination with Tali Nates, founder and executive director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, Nadine Shahar, director of Talking Memory, online lecture series, and the international education programs at the Ghetto Fighters House, Esther Toporek, finder, member of the GSI Coordinating Council, Generations of the Shoah, and in partnership with Liberation 75, welcome you here today. Our event today would not be possible without the dedicated involvement of Tali Nates. Tali is a historian who lectures span the globe, focusing on Holocaust and genocide education, memory, reconciliation, and human rights. Her personal connection to the Holocaust with her father and uncle saved by Oskar Schindler adds a deeply personal dimension to her work. Tali has been involved in the creation and production of numerous documentary films, authored articles, and contributed to various books that illuminate the importance of Holocaust remembrance, education, and combating anti-Semitism. It is great to have Tali here with us tonight, but we are going to move in just a moment to the recording. As always, we will drop Professor Pető's extensive bio in the chat for you. If you would like to have questions during this session, please send your questions directly to me, Ellen Resnick, in the chat. We will collect these and send them along to Professor Pető, and we will follow up with her responses. And with that, please give us a bit of grace as we begin the recording.
Good evening, good morning. Wonderful to join you in this series that started already in the beginning of the year, where we're looking at the Holocaust and also at other ways and other disciplines in our tapestry of looking at what do we learn about the Holocaust from other disciplines. And today we are looking at gender in the Holocaust, which is really exciting because we have one of the foremost experts in the world with us, all the way from Vienna, from the Central European University, CEU, and that is Professor Andrea Pető. And Andrea will, of course, share with us her thoughts about gender and the Holocaust, and then we'll answer all your questions because this is a pre-recorded interview due to traveling and prior engagements, and she will answer all your questions through an email publication to all of you. Andrea, welcome to our pre-recorded interview. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tali, and let me congratulate to this very important project you are doing, because teaching is the tool we have in these extremely complicated and painful times. So let me share my screen, and this will be like 30, 35 minutes, just when you are planning to run for a coffee or not. I mean, this is the time frame. And I would like to talk about the who are those who are unremembered. So how to remember and who are those who have got the right to remember. And this is Andrea Dworkin's text from 1994. When she visited the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and recognized that the women were missing from the narrative, from the exhibition. She was arguing that I want to know the story of women in the Holocaust, to remember and also to make a space for them. So basically reclaiming women's voices, bringing back the missing stories. So reconceptualizing the Holocaust narrative, because the narrative of the Holocaust is, of course, what we are teaching, what we are knowing about is a result of certain political, cultural, religious configurations. Therefore, it is important to make sure that it is as inclusive as possible. So you can, of course, ask the question, why did Tolly say that gender is important? Why is this important? Because the Holocaust affected men and women differently, and also because the biological and cultural meanings ascribed to femininity and masculinity are very different, and they are used by the different political forces differently. So what can gender analysis do? Two things based on Sarah Horowitz's work, to recover the experiences of women. So please think about the opening slide about reclaiming the unremembered, and also to reshape or to nuance the Holocaust memory. So to make a more refined understanding of what happened and how it actually influenced certain groups. But of course, it's not without risk. So now I'm talking a little bit about the risks. And then later on, I will talk about how the different fields of Holocaust research can be gendered. And then I will finish with a list of terms, which I hope that the takeaway points for teachers. And I give you 3 questions to think about. So that's basically the plan for this coming 30 minutes. So what are the risks? So again, Sarah Horowitz was saying that viewing women only as objects of a particular subset of genocidal practices connected to biological functions, pregnancy, motherhood, and sexual violations. Because if you are looking at the history of the women in the Holocaust or gender Holocaust, and what are the topics which are discussed in the different books or the different conferences, you usually find these topics which are connected to the biological specificity of a certain human body. And this somehow invites that the bodies are the places where this violence is inflicted on. So it's a kind of victim position. And it's only part of the story, because there are several resistance stories which might be interesting to follow up. The other is related to the important debate in the Holocaust literature about the wrong question. And so this is the debate between Ringelheim and Osig in the 1998. In 1998, we have to acknowledge Ringelheim's historical contribution to the research on Holocaust, because she was running the oral history section of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and she recognized that the stories of women somehow accidentally disappearing in this leaky pipeline. But Cynthia Osig was criticizing Ringelheim, who was arguing that women should be included. This is the first slide, namely that women's stories should be included, simply saying that you are asking the wrong question. And this wrong question, what is a wrong question when you are researching the Holocaust? That's an important question. So Osig is arguing that it's morally wrong to look at certain groups as victims of violence, because she's arguing that that the Jewish identity comes first and the gender identity is not that important. And I will talk a little bit about what is nowadays a buzzword, which is intersectionality. So how this concept of intersectionality can help us to somehow overcome this dilemma, which is even nowadays very often present in the scholarship. So what is the right question, and is there a right question at all? And so rephrasing that, how did the Judaism and the Nazi ideology had an impact on women and men during the Holocaust and after the war? So looking at the impact and how it actually impacted differently men and women, and looking at the master, the dominant and typical narrative of the Holocaust, and also looking at the public memorialization and the private memorialization, and how come it's impossible to include women's memories of sexual exploitation in the public memorialization when their bodies were as a battleground for the Nazis. So these kind of questions need to be asked, especially because these bodies were obviously a battleground for the Holocaust. So is there a right or a good question? Is this helping us to understand or not? So what are the promises? What is the promise of the gender analysis? And before, first we have to really understand the difference between women, gender, and sex as a category of analysis, because nowadays everything is gender. There is this gender inflation, but very often gender means nothing else than biological sex, or just a replacement for women, or it is an identity, or it's a system of different structural discriminations and value systems which are influencing societal positions. So when gender is mentioned, always very important to ask the question, what gender does in that particular framework, and what is this analysis can offer for us. And of course, this public the beginning of this analysis is the public and private distinction, that the public sphere is connected to masculinity and the private to the care and women. And the question is how this public and private distinction has changed or modified or had been reconceptualized during the Holocaust. And there are several really interesting topics about the very important research about the women who remained alone with small kids in the ghettos, and the men were fighting or were taken away, and how did that influence the whole family and the whole value system and the whole symbolic horizon they had. And of course, gender is not only about women. This is also about masculinities, and how this how the victimized men under the gaze of the liberators versus the gaze of the victimized men upon women had been differentiated. And of course, the good example is the Schindler's List, how these heroic masculinities had been reproduced in the movie. And that is, of course, an important topic to discuss. And when I talk about the how the different topics of the Holocaust research had been gendered or can be gendered, I will also talk about this. So asking the right question. So, I mean, this is my position if we are using this kind of authoritative position. What is the right question? And I think nowadays we should ask, because the stakes are very high. What are the right questions? So my question is, my right question is, but you might have another right question, then please send me an email about this, that how was the Holocaust narrative constructed? So what are those, how the memorialization has been constructed, and the master narrative that, again, I'm quoting Horowitz, that reflects on the male voices, male experiences, and male memories as normative. And this normativity of the male experiences, how this narrative shapes individual and cultural memories. Is there a space to insert the individual memories, or the whole concept of the memorialization should be reconsidered? And here is a quote from Anna Redding from 2002, when she was talking about this multidirectional memory and how the past is actually constructed dialectically, and to develop through history and from historical accounts, which in turn are fed back into the collective and popular memories of events. So the memory is never a finished product, like, you know, my mug, which I have here, but it's always in a process of reconfiguration. And that's why it's an important political, academic and strategic question, how these memories are being constructed and configured. And so here are some of the questions which I think are the right questions to ask nowadays. So how this multidirectional memory, this formation of the memory, becomes a shared memory, which is consensual and which is actually making the change, because that's what partly we are doing this research, the never again, that we should actually learn from the past and, you know, prevent this happen again. Where are women in the Holocaust museums? You can always ask this question and go around, look around in the different exhibitions where you are coming from. And where are women from the Holocaust scholarship? Because there are very few women in the Holocaust scholarship, and what kind of work they are doing. So let's see first this relationship to the multidirectional memory, especially because there is this strong resistance to apply gender lens to the study of the Holocaust, despite that other subfields of historical research had been acceptable. And if you are going to conferences, you have got one panel which is about gender, and this kind of compartmentalization and this kind of research is really unfortunate, because it somehow prevents the mainstreaming of this kind of new approach to history. And of course, if we start from the definition of genocide, how Lemkin defined genocide, then it includes this definition, the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups. And of course, women as targets of hate and genocidal policy is an important question. And of course, the other side of the question, that why women are mobilized for hate, because there are so many women who are actually perpetrators. And this is my field of research, looking at women who are actually killers, who are perpetrators. And this kind of different impact of the different practices affected men and women differently. And of course, it changed how the biological and cultural meanings ascribed to femininity and masculinity. So I already mentioned one example, that what happened when the families remained alone, or what happened with the kids who had to be surviving alone. And it's of course connected to the canon and the canonization, the processes of exclusion and inclusion. And this kind of exclusion and inclusion are always the products of different political configurations, and sometimes some memory entrepreneurs are intervening into this process, like Andrea Dworkin, for example, whom I mentioned, or Joan Ringelheim, whom we should mention because these names are very easily slipping out from the memory. So, but it's of course not complicated. It's more complicated than it sounds. So what are the complications? First is that gendering the Holocaust, is it sexing the Holocaust? And of course, we know that the concept of gender was introduced in the US anti-discrimination legal legislation because the memory activists, or those who were fighting the anti-discrimination for the anti-discrimination law, they did not want to put sex in the law because they thought that these elderly white male legislators will think about the porno and the kind of adult films. So that's why they invented this concept of gender. But the question is, are we conflating, substituting gender with women? And if we are, what are the consequences? Because women are only an object of particular subset of genocidal practices connected to biological function. And the question is, of course, whose gaze are we talking about? So here are some examples. The whole big topic of motherhood during the Holocaust, and the story of the lipstick when the liberating American soldiers were distributing lipstick as the most important essential among the inmates of the concentration camp, also about the issue of the mikveh, and how this exclusion and inclusion of women is are happening, what are the gendered roles, how they are changing, and how women are often the objects of desire and or sometimes even the actors of atrocity. So these are all these complicated topics which are hard to study and difficult to study and require certain ethical and moral considerations. And to avoid objectifying women, reducing them to their bodily functions and only to becoming the reproducing the gaze of the perpetrator. So the second complication, which is beyond the topic, is gender as a category of analysis. And gender as a category has its very complex history. And I already mentioned that when I was talking about the women, gender, sex, right? So what is what? What does what in the history, and what does what in the history of the Holocaust? And I already mentioned that gender was developed in order to avoid saying sex, right? So I mean that has got very serious implications, and especially because gender, and I don't know from where you are watching this recording, is an English term, right? So it has got this kind of implication that it's and Heidemarie Winkel wrote a fantastic article about this, that it itself is a product of certain cultural modes, and it can be essentialist, homogenizing, and ethnocentric itself. So that's why when we are using gender, we have to be very careful about in what context and in what historical connotations, because very often gender has been used as a way of colonizing. So saying that you have to catch up with those gendered norms in the neoliberalization of the context. And also we are living in illiberal times. And then when gender is often used as a political tool to label certain groups as enemies. And with colleagues, we wrote this article, Gender as Symbolic Glue, when we were actually arguing that when different politicians and public intellectuals and very often academics are using gender or gender theory or in their speech, what do they mean under this term gender? And we were arguing that gender is as a glue which was invented to glue together different political actors, different political forces, through the concept of hate, exclusion, with a promise of normality and other world order. So the liberals are using gender not as I use gender, or some of you might use gender, but it's some colleagues are calling gender as an empty signifier or a proxy. We are calling it as a symbolic glue. So it's definitely not what you think it is, because it glues together, let's say, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Polish football hooligans, the Brazilian Catholic fundamentalists, through hate, that they hate certain groups of people, and they offer a view of what normal is, and for them what normal is the heteronormative family, and avoiding complexities and offering a kind of security in this extremely complex world raged by the polycrisis. So I'm mentioning this because the title is gender, right? So, and please don't take it as granted that you know what gender is, because this is only the first step. The second step is that your colleagues and the people whom you are actually collaborating, what kind of gender definition they are using. And unfortunately, or fortunately, gender became this battlefield in this new Cold War, which is not cold anymore, but it definitely the different actors are fighting this kind of ideological fight or Kulturkampf or cultural war on the field of gender. So that's why it's really crucial to have this discussion here and now. And thanks again, Tali, for the invitation, because that is, getting this straight and right, the right question and the right approach is the only possibility to fight this kind of illiberal forces, which are consciously mixing, messing up these definitions, and they are using gender as a moving goalpost. So when you think you know what is gender, they are using another definition. So, and then of course you can say that, do we need at all gender when we want to study the history of the Holocaust? And I will come back to this question. So, but there are some other complications, which is problematizing race and colonial legacy, and especially because of this connected to gender, because gender is very often used as a neoliberal tool for setting up certain norms. And this kind of colonial legacy and also the whole complexities of race are also something which we might want to take into consideration when we are talking about gender and the Holocaust. And the fourth complexity is related to the concept of intersectionality. So if you remember, I started from the wrong question. So can you ask the question about women in the Holocaust when you should more speak about the Jews? That's Cynthia Ozik's argument. And here I would like to argue for intersectionality with a very cautious way. Here is a definition of intersectionality, which it's from 2008. And if you put intersectionality in the Google, hundreds of thousands of findings are there, because intersectionality is a buzzword nowadays, the same way as gender. And so the definition is useful because it says intersectionality is the idea that social identities such as race, gender, and class interact, that's the key word, to form qualitatively different meanings and experiences. So intersectionality is more a method than a theory, and it looks at how the different identities are forming the subjects and its experience and its meaning-making process. If it's too abstract, let me give you an example. It's very different if you are analyzing the experiences and the stories of Hannah Arendt, or somebody who was living in a religious shtetl in poverty, right? So it's the intersectional approach is crucial in order to open up spaces for the different differences in a meaningful way. So not for the sake of alibi additive intersectionality, but looking at how these different differences are constituting together the experiences. And of course, it has got lots of potential intersectionality. And if you Google intersectionality, this Japanese sticks are coming up everywhere, and nearly every book uses this as on the cover, because it's easy to visualize, like it's, intersect, right? And it shows the differences among women. It's both a theory and an action, but please note that I was mentioning methodology. It's also a methodology. It is Anglo-Saxon normativity. So if you are Googling intersectionality, mostly the English terms come up. And if you Google that in German, there are some couple of 10,000. So you see that that's again connected to Anglo-Saxon context. It is empirical, which is really important for the history of for the historians, because you have this empirical grounding. It's very positive because at the end you can make statements. It is spotting your blind spots, because what is what you don't see? You are asking always the question, what is what you don't see because of the different intersections? And it's giving a political agenda to uncover those blind spots. And that's what we are doing in those who are working on the gender and the Holocaust, to spot the white spots and the blind spots. But what is what hasn't been talked about? And why, and how can we explore that, and what is what we can bring in here. And also it's a transdisciplinary method. So I hope that by now, till now, I convincingly argued that this including different groups into the historical narrative about the Holocaust makes sense. It's also a political, strategic, intellectual, and academic necessity, but this is not always easy. And here is a story, here is a quote from Schoenfeld, who in 1998 basically summarized all the counter-argument why gender and Holocaust should not be studied together. So we always have to learn from the opponents and to figure out what is their problem, because then it will enrich our argumentative toolkit. So so here the author argues that the purpose of the consciousness raising, it's a propaganda, and that it's adding its own special notes and righteous self-regard. So basically presenting those who are doing this kind of research as propagandists, and also who are as an ego and a professional project. So this did not get better, but rather worse, because of the liberal turn, where I'm talking to you from Vienna, because the university I'm teaching for, which is the Central European University, what you see behind me, had to move from Budapest to Vienna as a university in exile, and the whole calamity started with the deleting of the gender studies, the accredited 2-year gender studies program from the study list without any explanation. So the 2-year MA program was just disappeared. So it means that this whole discussion about including gender, or what is the gender analysis, what gender analysis can do for us, is not only an academic debate. It's a really serious political and strategic debate. And I have to say, this is a fantastic political opportunity for gender studies scholars, because now our work has been really popular and lots of people are reading us. So it's a kind of paradoxical recognition. And the other problem, which is very often coming up, I mean, you had this first reaction, the Schoenfeld, which is a very brutal summary of the counter-argument, but there is another one from Ringelheim, who is basically arguing that the women's criticizing cultural feminism, and saying that these aspects of women's daily lives, vulnerability to rape, humiliation, sexual exchange, pregnancy, abortion, cannot be universalized for all survivors. So basically, she's arguing to keep a separate pot or a separate field for this kind of research. And that's also this is 1985, so a lot has happened, but this kind of tendency to keep this as a separate spot has been remained. Especially because of this her story turn of the liberals, who are trying to create this very separate field for women's history, not gender history, but women's history, which is mostly about these biological characteristics of women. So I was arguing that there is a necessity, a political, academic necessity to remember the unremembered. I was talking about the complexities and the problems with the concept of gender, with the narrative, the multidirectionality. I brought in some arguments how the different opponents are seeing this kind of field. And now I would like to bring in examples. Why is this important, gendering the Holocaust? What we can learn? And here are some research topics, like, what do we get? What we have missed before, and what do we get if we are applying a gendered lens? So, like in the phase of the ghettoization, how the Orthodox Jewish men were, of course, subjected by public humiliation, but but women were differently, and how this actually targeted the leaders. So please think about intersectionality here, because the Jewish leaders, because of the class or the status position, had a very different experience than the kind of non-leading positions. And also that there was this widespread belief that the Germans would not harm women and children. And this had disastrous consequences as far as the strategies are concerned, and the choices what people made in this kind of extremely troubling and uncertain times. And then they left the children and the women behind. And also that women without husbands were vulnerable, and also that we know that women made up 65% of the ghetto population. So what are the consequences? What we miss if we don't take this into consideration? Class, if we don't take into consideration the position in the family, if we don't take into consideration the religiosity, like Orthodox Jewish men, or the assimilated women. In the concentration camps, we also know that most of the documentation had been destroyed by the Nazis, and we know that the Ravensbrück is the camp which was specifically set up for women. And I would like to draw your attention to the memorial work, what the Ravensbrück Memorial Center is doing, and the conferences and the publications and the fantastic work they have been doing in the past years. And also that this is not one camp, several camps, and how the female labor force was used in order to make the Nazi war machine running. And also that women were very more likely to be sent straight to the gas chamber, and what did it mean that somebody had a child, and what the pregnancy meant, and also the sexual humiliation and rape. And especially rape is something which is not that much discussed. And if you are visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau nowadays, this is also something which is really not discussed in the just recently they mapped the a place where a brothel was operating. And so this is something which is tabooized and silenced and forgotten. And in this particular sense, it's a mistake for the scholarship, and also for the survivors, because a part of their story has been missing, and also for those who were the victims, they are not memorialized. Gender, this is how Joan Wallach-Scott defines gender, which is a constitutive element and the primary signifier of relationship to power. And this is directly leading to the wrong question, right? Because Ozick was basically arguing that this kind of asking the question is the wrong question, but exactly asking this question, that the differences between sexes and how it signifies the relationship to power, actually enriches the scholarship, including the study of masculinities, and how the Jewish families had been attacked by the Nazis, and how it changed the masculinities and femininities, and how it actually impacted fathers, and that they were not able to protect children. And here is a quote from Elie Wiesel, whose text is, of course, a major text about how we look at the Holocaust, and when he was describing his father crying, that's the turning point for him. And that shows that missing this point that would actually take a very important element of the story from us. And also here is this the story of the pre-war Jewish life, that we can look at the differences between the East and the West, also the class and also religion from a gender perspective, connected to the gender perspective. So here I'm actually arguing that the intersectional approach of bringing all these differences together, that would help us to understand the history better. Oh, sorry, I mean that's the, why is this and the aftermath, and how the survivors and the speaking about the experiences. And I had a student who was analyzing the Shoah Visual History Archive interviews, how the same surviving group, two survivors, a male and a female survivor, interviewed by a male interviewer, were actually interviewed totally differently. So because of the interviewer was asking mostly questions related to intimacy and personal life to the female survivor, and to the man about the worldview and political issues. So, and therefore, this is crucial to think about the spaces to remember, and also to unpack our gendered stereotypes and expectations, which are really influencing the way how we are thinking about the past, and of course the different artists who are representing the atrocities and the policies for remembrance, like how this is actually creating spaces. So now I'm ending with the terms and concepts, which I think might be useful when you are thinking about gendering the Holocaust. So please note that I was talking about why gender is complicated. Gendering is even more complicated. And nowadays, during this illiberal term, it's particularly difficult. So the concept of the dual oppression, how actually women were the victims of not only the patriarchal oppression, but also the oppression, the dual oppression of during the Holocaust, the particular vulnerabilities of women, which actually made us special targets of the Nazi oppression, researching with a set of agenda. Because if you remember this person, Schoenfeld, who was saying that these are propagandist activists who are doing this research. On the other hand, it's true, because there is always a reason why you are doing research, because you want to have change and you want to make something which is not known. And it is a set of agenda. And nowadays, when you might want to be very proud of this, saying that I'm doing this because, and analyzing the difference between experience, memory, and emplotment. So how the emplotments are, how experiences are narrated in a gendered way, how memories are gendered, and how the emplotment of the stories are gendered, looking at the difference between experienced, remembered, and narrated experiences. And there are experiences which are not narrated very often, like sexual violence or sexual humiliation, looking at how testimonies and narratives are gendered, not only what are the tropes, what women are using in these testimonies, but also how the interviewing process of collecting interviews is a gendered process, looking at the intersectionality as a method, how you can actually grasp the complexities of the society, using Holocaust as a metaphor, but also as a prism, thinking of canon and gendering the canon, and creating a conceptual place for including different groups with this concept of dialogical remembering, and speaking about structural and historical trauma. So these are the main concepts I thought might be useful. And here are the three concepts, three questions I'm suggesting to think about why gender specificities of the memory and the history of the Holocaust were ignored, forgotten, and omitted. Right? So these are the questions: that why is this tabooized? Why is this forgotten? What are the frameworks of the Holocaust narrative which are in itself make it difficult to ask those questions? And how the writing of gender history interacts with the field of Holocaust studies, because this interaction is not easy and not unproblematic. What are the paradoxes and what are the achievements? And if you Google Holocaust and gender, you see lots of articles, lots of books coming out. So you see that in the past years, there had been a major breakthrough in this field. But in illiberal times, this kind of breakthrough can be easily taken away. And the last question is, use case studies for the class to explain how forgetting and omissions are shaping the narratives. And you might want to use this example, which I was mentioning, that to use from one's similar group, survival group, a male and a man or a woman, and then compare the narratives. And this example was from the Kindertransport to England, and the two survivors were coming from the same social background, same cultural background. They both had career after 45. Still, if you listen to the interviews, they are very gendered, in a sense that the man was speaking about political concepts and messages for the future, and the woman was expected to talk about families and emotions. So, and that, of course, raises the question: what are our own responsibility and our own limits? And that's why I'm very grateful for this opportunity to have this conversation with you. And I'm looking forward to the questions, because gender matters and there are lots of right questions to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. A brilliant, brilliant talk, very thought-provoking talk, and really making us think about how do we teach these topics in the classroom, maybe in high school, university, or indeed in museums and memorials where we are portraying these issues. So I look very much forward to your questions, you in the audience. Please send them to Classroom Without Borders, and Professor Pető will be very happy to answer your questions in due course. And again, thank you so much, Andrea. Much appreciated. And have a wonderful trip and well-deserved acceptance for the prize for the Babin Yar Memorial. Congratulations to all involved.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, one second.
Well, thank you, all of you. I have compiled the list of questions that came through the chat. If you have any additional questions, please send them to me in the chat now, and I will be sure to send those along to Professor Pető, and we'll follow up with an email. As always, we will follow up with the recording of this event. I would like to express our appreciation to Tali and Professor Pető for today's event. We look forward to seeing you next month, when the topic will be Memory Studies, Museums and Memorials, with Miriam Zadok. As we navigate these trying moments, we remain committed to staying informed and connected. We hope that you will join us next month, and we also hope that you will join us on Wednesday for our event on the update on Israel with our in-house scholar, Avi Ben-Hur, who is reporting from Jerusalem. In recognition of the ongoing situations and the resilience of the Israeli people, we are pleased to announce a new series starting on Mondays, entitled Reflections from the Israeli Homefront 2023. This will be facilitated by Rabbi John T. Blackman, who is also in Israel. This series will provide an opportunity for us to reflect on the experiences of those on the Israeli homefront during these times of adversity, offering fresh perspectives and deepening our understanding. We extend our gratitude to all of you for your active participation and support. Together, we can work towards building bridges of understanding and empathy during these testing times. As always, if you would like to help us support our mission, please visit our website to donate online. Also, my colleague Erica is going to drop in the chat our link to our membership website. If you would like to join our website and membership and get on our email blast list, you can get updates on all of these events. Tali, are there any closing words you would like to say?
Just thank you so much. I think coming together as a community in times like that is so important, and seeing many friends and colleagues that are joining us every month makes us all connect in these very, very challenging and heartbreaking times. So thank you, and thank you for opening for this tapestry to their partners, Esther, Maydeen, in Classroom Without Borders. Really, it is talking about the Holocaust in such different ways, and today was no exception. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everyone. And
thank you, Tali.
Stay safe.
And I echo all of your sentiments. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see you again next month. Be well.